Welcome to Clover Park, the most beautiful spot in all of Meadowtown. The flowers were blooming, the birds were singing, and the sky was the perfect shade of bright blue. Racing through the park gates, his red sneakers a blur beneath him, came Dash the fox, arms full of picnic supplies. A huge grin stretched right across his face. Today, he declared loudly, was going to be absolutely perfect. Right behind Dash, walking very carefully with a clipboard in hand, came Whisker the mouse. She had spent 3 whole days preparing her perfect picnic checklist, and every single item had been ticked off. Twice, she adjusted her big round glasses and called out to Dash, warning him not to trip over his own tail again. Dash laughed. He did not laugh for long. He tripped immediately. After Whisker helped gather the scattered sandwiches, the two friends finally reached the Great Meadow, the most perfect picnic spot in the entire park. Sunlight poured down on the soft green grass like liquid gold. There was just enough shade from the nearby willow tree, and a lovely view of the duck pond. Dash spread his arms wide and said this was the most magnificent place in the universe. Whisker checked it off her list. Dash dramatically unrolled the picnic blanket with a grand swooshing gesture, but the wind caught it entirely, sending it sailing into the air like a colorful kite. It floated gracefully over the meadow before landing perfectly flat on the grass all by itself. Both Dash and Whisker stared at it in disbelief. Then they looked at each other. Then Dash took a deep bow as if he had planned the whole thing. Whisker did not applaud. Soon everything was laid out beautifully. Sandwiches in a neat pyramid, lemonade in a tall shiny jug, and Whisker's famous acorn and berry tarts lined up in a perfect row. Dash immediately reached for a tart, but Whisker slapped his paw away with her clipboard. They had to wait for the official start of picnic declaration, which was item number 17 on the checklist. Dash groaned loudly enough to disturb 3 nearby butterflies. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed from the willow tree above them. A loud, bouncy, rhythmic rustling that grew louder and louder. Then, with an enormous sprowing, a brown squirrel launched himself from a high branch and landed directly in the center of their picnic blanket, sending sandwiches, tarts, and lemonade flying in every direction. The squirrel bounced to his feet, grinned ear to ear, and announced with a rhyme, "Found a spot, nice and hot. This meadow is ALL that I've got." Dash stood frozen, staring at a single sandwich spinning in midair before plopping onto his head. Whisker stared at her clipboard in despair. Items 1 through 17 were all now irrelevant. The squirrel, whose name turned out to be Boing, was already making himself comfortable, fluffing up his enormous tail like a cushion. "My spot, my plot. I like it a lot," he chirped happily. Dash looked at Whisker. Whisker looked at Dash. This meant war. Dash and Whisker ducked behind the big oak tree for an emergency strategy meeting. Dash's plan was to challenge Boing to a race. Whoever won kept the spot. Whisker thought this was terrible. Her plan was to politely ask Boing to leave, citing section 4 of the official Clover Park etiquette guide she happened to have in her backpack. Dash thought this was even more terrible. They argued in urgent whispers while Boing sang loudly about acorns in the background. While arguing, they nearly stepped on Old Fern the tortoise, who was resting peacefully on his favorite mossy bench near the duck pond. Old Fern opened one slow eye, looked them both up and down, and said, "Ah, the squirrel has taken your spot. I see." He had seen it happen before, 17 times, in fact. Boing was a regular visitor to Clover Park. Old Fern suggested they think cleverly rather than quickly. Whisker loved this advice immediately. Dash less so. Old Fern explained, very slowly, that Boing absolutely could not resist a challenge involving collecting things. The squirrel collected buttons, bottle caps, shiny pebbles, and once an entire park fountain. If Dash and Whisker could send Boing off on an impossible collecting quest, they would have the meadow to themselves. Whisker's eyes lit up behind her glasses. Dash leapt to his feet so fast he knocked over a duck that had wandered too close. The duck was unimpressed. Armed with a plan, Dash and Whisker marched back to the meadow with fresh determination. Boing was now juggling the remaining sandwiches and reciting a poem about sunshine. Dash put on his most impressive voice and announced that somewhere in Clover Park there existed the rarest treasure of all, a rainbow pine cone, which changed color every 10 seconds and smelled like fresh strawberries. Boing froze mid-juggle. Every sandwich dropped. His enormous eyes went wide as saucers. Boing grabbed Dash by both ears, staring into his eyes with trembling intensity. "A rainbow pine cone? A rainbow pine cone," he repeated, his bushy tail rotating like a helicopter rotor with excitement. He immediately began rhyming at full speed. "I'll find it quick. I'll do the trick. Collecting is my favorite pick." Then, like a furry brown rocket, Boing launched himself off the picnic blanket, bouncing from tree to tree and disappearing into the far side of the park. Silence fell over the meadow. Dash and Whisker stared at the spot where Boing had been a second ago. Then they slowly turned to look at their picnic blanket. The food was scattered but mostly intact. Whisker immediately began reorganizing everything at top speed while Dash collected every stray sandwich with impressive athletic leaps. Within 4 minutes and 32 seconds, which Whisker timed precisely, the picnic was restored to its former magnificent glory. Dash declared this a personal record. Finally, Whisker completed item 17 on her checklist and gave the official start of picnic declaration in her most ceremonious voice. Dash bit into a sandwich so fast he gave himself hiccups. Whisker sipped her lemonade with great dignity. A butterfly landed on Dash's nose. He went cross-eyed trying to look at it. The duck from the pond wandered over and sat down uninvited at the edge of the blanket. Whisker put him on the checklist under unexpected guest. Meanwhile, deep in the flower garden on the far side of the park, Boing was on the hunt. He had already collected 14 pine cones and examined each one for rainbow properties. None of them smelled like strawberries. Most of them smelled like pine cones, which Boing noted was deeply disappointing. He interrogated a passing ladybird, questioned 2 earthworms, and tried to bribe a bumblebee with half a cracker. The bumblebee was not interested in crackers. The search continued. Boing bounced through the oak grove, collecting now at full speed. He had added 17 buttons, a shiny blue bottle cap, 4 pebbles, and somebody's lost kite ribbon to his bundle. He was rhyming non-stop. Up the tree, round the bee. Collecting things is making me free. His enormous tail swept leaves off every branch he passed. Then, he spotted something glittering in the sunlight near the old stone fountain. His jaw dropped all the way to the ground. Sitting on the edge of the old stone fountain was a pine cone. But not just any pine cone. It had been painted by a park artist the week before and was covered in tiny dots of every color of the rainbow. And someone had spilled strawberry juice on a bench beside it. Boing sniffed the air and nearly fainted. He declared this, in an extremely loud rhyme, to be the greatest discovery since the invention of trees. He grabbed it with both paws and sprinted back toward the meadow. Back at the picnic, things were going wonderfully. Dash was teaching the grumpy duck how to play cards, which the duck was somehow very good at. Whisker was halfway through her second acorn and berry tart when the ground began to vibrate beneath them. A distant rumbling grew louder. Birds scattered from trees. The duck looked up. Whisker looked up. Dash looked up. Then Boing crash landed directly between them for the second time that afternoon, this time with an even bigger grin. Boing held up the rainbow-painted pine cone triumphantly, rhyming at full volume about his incredible adventure and his superior collecting skills. Dash and Whisker stared at it, then at each other. The duck quacked once in what may have been judgment. Whisker leaned in very close and studied the pine cone through her glasses. She noticed the paint. She noticed the strawberry juice smell coming from Boing's paws. She quietly cleared her throat and looked at Dash, who was trying very hard not to smile. Whisker adjusted her glasses and very gently informed Boing that the rainbow pine cone did not actually exist. She explained calmly that Dash had invented it to reclaim their picnic spot. Boing went completely still. His bushy tail drooped slowly to the ground. His bottom lip wobbled. His collection bundle slipped from his paws. Then something unexpected happened. Boing burst into the most enormous laughter any of them had ever heard, rolling backwards off the blanket and kicking his feet in the air with delight. Boing laughed so hard that tears rolled down his furry cheeks. He declared it the best trick anyone had ever pulled on him in 500 park visits. He shook Dash's paw vigorously, then Whisker's, then the duck's, who refused but looked slightly flattered. Boing apologized for wrecking the picnic, twice, and produced from deep in his bundle a small jar of cloudberry jam he had been carrying all day, which he presented to Whisker as a peace offering. Whisker spread the cloudberry jam on the remaining tarts, which everyone agreed made them twice as delicious. Boing turned out to have an entire collection of snacks hidden in his bundle: 3 bags of sunflower seeds, a honeycomb bar, and a perfectly good apple. Old Fern arrived slowly just in time, as he always did, and accepted a sandwich with quiet grace. Even the grumpy duck eventually stole an extra tart when no one was watching, then pretended he had not. As the golden afternoon sun began to dip toward the treetops, painting the sky in beautiful orange and pink, the group played 3 rounds of Boing's favorite collecting game, which turned out to be genuinely brilliant fun. Even Whisker added Boing's game to her checklist under highly recommended activities as Dash won 1 round by sheer luck, shouted loud enough to scatter the ducks from the pond, and declared himself the greatest collector in all of Meadowtown. Nobody agreed, but nobody minded. As the park gates came into view, glowing in the last warm rays of the day, the group said their goodbyes. Boing promised, in rhyme, to look for a real rainbow pine cone and bring it next time. Whisker crossed off the final item on her checklist: have a perfect day. She ticked it firmly. Dash put his arm around her shoulder and said the day had been pretty perfect after all. Whisker agreed, then immediately started writing tomorrow's checklist. Some things never change.